The church bells tolled, but Brandon's heart screamed louder. He stood frozen in the back pew, his hands trembling as he clutched a crumpled photograph, the truth burning a hole in his chest. Today was supposed to be his father's wedding day, but Brandon was about to unravel a secret that would shatter everything. The First Presbyterian Church in Savannah, Georgia, was a vision of elegance. White lilies adorned the pews, their scent mingling with the anticipation of 200 guests. Brandon, 24, stood out in his fitted navy blazer, his dark hair catching the light streaming through the stained glass windows. His green eyes, usually bright with mischief, were clouded with dread. He wasn't here to celebrate. He was here to stop it. His father, Richard, a charismatic lawyer in his late 50s, stood at the altar, beaming in a classic black tuxedo. Beside him was the bride-to-be, Cassandra, a radiant woman in her 40s, her blonde hair cascading beneath a delicate veil. To the world, they were the perfect couple, a story of second chances after Richard's painful divorce from Brandon's mother a decade ago. But Brandon knew better. Cassandra wasn't who she claimed to be. 3 months ago, Brandon had met Ethan at a local art gallery. Ethan, 25, was a photographer with a quiet intensity, his warm brown eyes and chiseled features drawing Brandon in like a moth to a flame. Their connection was instant, electric, a whirlwind of late-night talks, stolen kisses, and shared dreams. But it was Ethan's discovery, stumbled upon during a routine photo archive search, that changed everything. A single image, buried in a forgotten folder, revealed Cassandra's past, a past she'd hidden from Richard and everyone else. "Brandon, you don't have to do this," Ethan whispered, standing beside him in the church's shadowed aisle. His charcoal suit hugged his frame, and his hand grazed Brandon's, a silent anchor. "You can walk away." "I can't," Brandon replied, his voice barely audible. "If I don't speak now, my dad's life is over." The organ swelled, signaling the start of the ceremony. Cassandra glided down the aisle, her smile serene, but Brandon's pulse raced. The photograph in his pocket felt like a grenade. He'd spent weeks wrestling with what to do, torn between loyalty to his father and fear of destroying the man's happiness. But the truth was undeniable, and it was far worse than anyone could imagine. As the minister began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today," Brandon's resolve hardened. He stepped into the aisle, his polished shoes clicking against the stone floor. Heads turned, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Richard's smile faltered, his brow creasing with confusion. "Brandon," he called softly, his voice carrying over the organ's fading notes. "I'm sorry, Dad," Brandon said, his voice shaking but firm. "This wedding can't happen." Gasps echoed through the church. Cassandra's smile vanished, her blue eyes narrowing. "Brandon, what are you doing?" she asked, her tone sharp but controlled. He pulled the photograph from his pocket, holding it up for all to see. It was grainy but unmistakable. Cassandra, younger, standing beside a man in a dimly lit alley, her hand gripping a briefcase. The man was Victor Crane, a notorious figure in Savannah's underbelly, linked to a string of unsolved crimes. The timestamp on the photo was from 5 years ago, when Cassandra claimed she'd been living a quiet life in Charleston. "This is who you're marrying," Dad, Brandon said, his voice rising. She's not Cassandra Wells. Her real name is Claire Voss, and she's been lying to you from the start. The church erupted in chaos. Guests whispered, some reaching for their phones. Richard's face paled, his eyes darting between Brandon and Cassandra. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. Cassandra's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, stepping toward Brandon. "That's not me." He's confused, but Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. "It's her. I found the photo in an old archive from a freelance job. It's linked to a police investigation that never closed." Brandon's heart pounded as he faced his father. "Dad, she's connected to Victor Crane. He's a criminal, money laundering, extortion, worse. She's not here for love. She's here for your money, your connections, everything." Richard staggered, clutching the altar for support. "Cassandra, tell me this isn't true," he pleaded. Her lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, her mask slipped, revealing something cold, calculating. Then she turned and bolted for the side door. "Stop her!" Brandon shouted. Guests scrambled, and Ethan sprinted after her, his athletic frame closing the distance. Brandon followed, adrenaline surging. They caught her in the church courtyard, where she stood cornered, her veil askew. "You don't understand," Cassandra hissed, her voice low. "You're ruining everything." "Call the police," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. "Now," as sirens wailed in the distance. Brandon looked at his father, who stood frozen in the church doorway. Heartbreak etched across his face. This wasn't how Brandon had imagined the day ending. But the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way to save the man who'd raised him. The chaos in the church courtyard felt like a fever dream. Brandon's heart still raced as he watched the police handcuff Cassandra, or Claire, as her real identity was now exposed. Ethan stood beside him, his hand brushing Brandon's in a quiet gesture of support. The guests milled about, some whispering, others openly staring, as the reality of the interrupted wedding sank in. Richard approached, his face a mask of devastation. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I tried," Brandon said, guilt twisting in his gut. "You were so happy. Dad, I didn't want to break your heart until I was sure." Richard's eyes glistened, but he nodded, pulling Brandon into a tight embrace. "You did the right thing," he whispered. I need time." As the police led Cassandra away, she shot Brandon a look that chilled him, a mix of defiance and something darker, something unfinished. He knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ethan tugged at Brandon's sleeve, pulling him aside. "You okay?" he asked, his brown eyes searching Brandon's face. "No," Brandon admitted, his voice cracking. "But I will be. Because of you." Ethan's smile was soft, grounding. "We'll get through this." Together, their fingers intertwined, and for a moment, the world felt steady again. But Brandon couldn't shake the feeling that Cassandra's secrets ran deeper than they'd uncovered. And as the police sirens faded, a new question gnawed at him. What else was she hiding? The Savannah police station was a blur of fluorescent lights and murmured voices. Brandon sat in a stiff chair, his hands clasped tightly, while Ethan leaned against the wall nearby, his presence a quiet comfort. The photograph that had unraveled everything lay on the table in front of them, Now an official piece of evidence. Detective Laura Hayes, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, flipped through a file, her sharp eyes scanning Brandon and Ethan. "You two stirred up quite a storm," she said, her southern drawl softened by a hint of respect. "This photo ties Claire Voss to Victor Crane, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. She's been on our radar for years, slippery as an eel." Brandon's stomach churned. "What do you mean? What else has she done?" Hayes leaned forward, her voice low. "Claire's got aliases across 3 states. She's been linked to fraud, identity theft, and a couple of missing persons cases that never stuck. Your dad's not her first mark." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So she's a con artist?" "Among other things," Hayes said. "We're digging into her connection with Crane. That man's a ghost, runs a network we've never cracked. If Claire's his partner, she's more dangerous than we thought." Brandon's mind raced. His father had been so smitten, so blind to Cassandra's, Claire's, deceptions. He thought back to the dinners they'd shared, her polished charm, the way she'd woven herself into Richard's life. It was all a lie. And yet, part of him still ached for his father's broken heart. "What happens now?" Brandon asked. "We're holding her for questioning," Hayes replied. "But she's not talking." "Not yet. We need more evidence to make anything stick." Ethan crossed his arms. "What about the photo? Isn't that enough?" "It's a start," Hayes said. "But Crane's network is airtight. We need something concrete, documents, recordings, anything that ties her to his operations." Brandon's thoughts drifted to the night he and Ethan had found the photo. They'd been at Ethan's apartment, a cozy loft filled with camera equipment and frame prints. Ethan had been sorting through old files for a gallery submission when he stumbled across the image. Buried in a folder labeled Charleston 2020, the discovery had felt like fate, a puzzle piece falling into place. But now, it seemed like just the beginning. "I want to help," Brandon said, determination hardening his voice. "Whatever it takes to keep her away from my dad." Hayes studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right. But you two need to stay safe. Crane's people don't take kindly to interference." As they left the station, the humid Savannah night wrapped around them. Ethan slipped his hand into Brandon's, his touch warm and steady. "You sure about this?" he asked. "This could get messy." "I'm sure," Brandon said, squeezing Ethan's hand. "I can't let her destroy my dad's life. Not after everything he's been through." They walked to Ethan's car, the city's historic charm dimmed by the weight of the day. As they drove through the oak-lined streets, Brandon's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed out of it." His blood ran cold. "Ethan, look at this." Ethan pulled over, his eyes narrowing as he read the message. "Someone's watching us," he said, his voice tight. "We need to be careful." Brandon's heart pounded, but he refused to back down. "Let them watch. We're not stopping." The next morning, Brandon and Ethan met at a small cafe near Forsyth Park. The air was thick with the scent of magnolias, but the beauty felt distant. They pored over Ethan's laptop, combing through his photo archives for anything else that might connect Claire to Crane. Hours passed, their coffee growing cold, until Ethan froze. "Brandon," he said, his voice urgent. "Look at this." It was another photo, this one from a different angle, but the same night. Claire, unmistakable in a sleek black dress, stood in the alley with Crane and another figure, partially obscured. The third person held a gun. Who is that? Brandon whispered. I don't know, Ethan said, zooming in. But this is bigger than we thought. They sent the new photo to Detective Hayes, who called them back within the hour. This changes everything, she said. That third person? We think it's Marcus Reed, Crane's right-hand man. If Claire's working with him, she's not just a con artist. She's in deep. Brandon's mind spun. His father's life, his safety, everything was at stake. He looked at Ethan, whose steady gaze anchored him. We need to find out what she's planning, Brandon said. Before it's too late. Ethan nodded, his hand finding Brandon's under the table. We'll do it together. As they left the cafe, the weight of their mission settled over them. Claire wasn't just a threat to Richard. She was a thread in a much larger web. And Brandon and Ethan were about to pull it apart, no matter the cost. The next week was a blur of sleepless nights and covert meetings. Brandon and Ethan became shadows, chasing leads while dodging the creeping sense that they were being watched. Detective Hayes had warned them to stay low, but Brandon couldn't sit still, not when his father was still reeling, holed up in his downtown apartment, refusing to talk about Cassandra. Brandon's phone buzzed constantly with cryptic messages from unknown numbers. Back off. You're in over your head. Each one tightened the knot in his stomach, but he refused to show fear. Ethan, ever the calm in the storm, kept him grounded. Their late-night talks in Ethan's loft, surrounded by the soft glow of string lights, became Brandon's lifeline. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Ethan pulled Brandon close, his lips brushing against his forehead. We're in this together, Ethan murmured. No matter what, Brandon's heart swelled, but fear lingered. What if we're not enough? What if she gets away? We won't let her, Ethan said, his voice firm. We've got this. Their next lead came from an unexpected source, Mia, a bartender at a dive bar on River Street. Ethan knew her from his photography gigs, and she'd overheard whispers about Victor Crane's operations. Over greasy burgers and flickering neon lights, Mia slid a napkin across the table with an address scrawled on it, a warehouse on the outskirts of Savannah. Crane's people use it, she said, her voice low. I don't know what for, but it's shady. Be careful. That night, Brandon and Ethan parked a block from the warehouse, the air thick with the scent of marsh and diesel. The building was a hulking shadow, its windows dark. Ethan clutched his camera, ready to document anything they found. Brandon's pulse raced as they crept closer, sticking to the shadows. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of crates and flickering lights. They moved silently, Ethan's camera clicking softly as he captured images of documents left on a table, ledgers, names, numbers. One name stood out, Claire Voss. Her signature was scrawled across a contract, tying her to a money laundering scheme that spanned the Southeast. Jackpot, Ethan whispered, but his voice cut off as footsteps echoed nearby. They ducked behind a crate, hearts pounding. Two men appeared. One of them Marcus Reed, the man from the photo. His voice was low, menacing. Claire's getting sloppy. That kid's a problem. Brandon's blood ran cold. They were talking about him. We'll handle it, the other man said. Crane wants this cleaned up fast. As the men moved away, Brandon and Ethan slipped out, their evidence burning a hole in Ethan's camera. They sent the photos to Hayes, who called them to the station the next morning. This is huge, she said, her eyes scanning the images. These ledgers could bring down half of Crane's network. But you two need to lay low. They know you're onto them. Brandon's jaw tightened. I'm not hiding. My dad's still a target. Hayes sighed. I get it. But you're no good to him dead. That night, Brandon and Ethan returned to Ethan's loft, the weight of their discovery heavy between them. As they sat on the couch, Ethan's hand found Brandon's, their fingers lacing together. I'm scared, Brandon admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Me too, Ethan said, his thumb brushing Brandon's knuckles. But we're stronger than they are. Because we've got this. He gestured to their joined hands, his smile soft but fierce. Brandon leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like defiance, like hope. For a moment, the world was just them, two young men fighting for truth, for love, for a future they could build together. But the moment shattered when Ethan's phone pinged. Another message, this one with a photo, Brandon and Ethan leaving the warehouse. The caption read, "Last warning." Brandon's heart sank. They were in deeper than ever, and the stakes were climbing. But as he looked at Ethan, he knew they couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. The threat hung over them like a storm cloud. But Brandon refused to back down. He and Ethan spent days piecing together the evidence, their small victories overshadowed by the growing danger. Detective Hayes had stationed an unmarked car outside Ethan's loft, but it did little to ease Brandon's nerves. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the street, felt like a warning. Richard, meanwhile, was a ghost of himself. Brandon visited him daily, bringing coffee and forcing conversation, but his father's eyes were distant, haunted. I loved her, Richard said one evening, staring out his apartment window. How could I be so blind? You weren't blind, Brandon said, his voice soft. You just wanted to believe in something good. Richard's gaze softened, and for the first time since the wedding, he reached for Brandon's hand. You're a good kid. I'm proud of you. The words hit Brandon hard, fueling his resolve. He and Ethan doubled down, meeting Hayes in secret to hand over more evidence, encrypted files Ethan had decoded from the warehouse photos. The files detailed Claire's role in Crane's network, including plans to siphon Richard's wealth through a fake investment scheme. But one detail chilled Brandon to the core. Claire had been tasked with eliminating loose ends, and Richard was one of them. We need to get my dad out of Savannah, Brandon said, his voice urgent as they sat in Hayes' cramped office. Already on it, Hayes replied. We're setting up a safe house. But we need to move fast. Crane's people are closing in. That night, Brandon and Ethan helped Richard pack a small bag, convincing him to leave under police protection. As they drove him to the safe house, Brandon's phone buzzed again. Another photo, Richard's apartment building, taken from the street. The message read, "You can't protect him." Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. They're trying to scare us. It's working, Brandon admitted, his voice shaking. But he squared his shoulders, determination overriding fear. We need to end this. Hayes had a plan, a sting operation to catch Claire and Marcus Reed in the act. The police had intercepted a coded message about a meeting at an abandoned factory near the Savannah River. It was a chance to take down Crane's key players, but it meant putting Brandon and Ethan in the line of fire. You don't have to do this, Hayes said, her eyes serious. We can handle it. No, Brandon said firmly. I started this. I'm seeing it through. Ethan nodded, his jaw set. We both are. The night of the sting was moonless, the factory looming like a skeleton against the river's edge. Brandon and Ethan wore wires, their every word monitored by Hayes' team. They slipped inside, Ethan's camera hidden in his jacket, ready to capture anything that could seal Claire's fate. The factory was a labyrinth of rusted machinery and dripping pipes. Claire's voice echoed from a corner, sharp and commanding. "We need to move the funds before the police close in." Marcus Reed's low growl followed. "What about the kid? He's a problem." Brandon's heart raced as he and Ethan crept closer, hidden behind a stack of crates. Claire's silhouette was unmistakable, her blonde hair glinting under a flickering bulb. "Brandon's nothing," she said coldly. "He'll be dealt with." Ethan's hand found Brandon's, squeezing tightly. They held their breath as Hayes' team moved in, flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Police! Hands up!" Chaos erupted. Claire bolted, but the officers were faster, tackling her to the ground. Marcus drew a gun, but a sniper's shot disarmed him before he could fire. Brandon and Ethan stayed low, their hearts pounding as the arrests unfolded. When it was over, Claire glared at Brandon from across the factory, her eyes burning with hatred. "You think this is the end?" she spat. "You have no idea what you've started." But as the police led her away, Brandon felt a weight lift. He turned to Ethan, their hands still clasped, and pulled him into a fierce embrace. "We did it," he whispered. Ethan's smile was tired but triumphant. "Yeah, we did." The aftermath of the sting left Savannah buzzing. News outlets ran wild with the story. A wedding interrupted, a con artist exposed, a criminal network cracked open. Brandon and Ethan became reluctant heroes, their faces splashed across local papers. But for Brandon, the victory felt hollow. His father was safe, but the betrayal lingered, a wound that wouldn't heal overnight. Richard moved back to his apartment, under police watch, and slowly began rebuilding his life. Brandon visited often, their conversations tentative but growing warmer. One evening, over takeout pizza, Richard looked at Brandon with a rare vulnerability. "I owe you everything," he said. "You and Ethan." Brandon smiled, his heart lighter. "We just wanted you safe." Ethan, meanwhile, was Brandon's rock. Their bond deepened through the chaos, forged in shared danger and quiet moments of tenderness. One night, as they walked through Forsyth Park, the fountain glowing under the stars, Ethan stopped and turned to Brandon. "I love you," he said, his voice steady, certain. Brandon's breath caught. He'd felt it for weeks, but hearing the words made it real. "I love you too," he replied, pulling Ethan into a kiss that felt like a promise. But the shadow of Claire's words lingered. "You have no idea what you've started." Detective Hayes called them to the station a week after the sting, her face grim. "Crane's still out there," she said. "Claire's talking, but it's not enough. He's got people everywhere, and they're not happy about the attention you've brought." Brandon's stomach twisted. "What does that mean for us?" "It means you need to stay vigilant," Hayes said. "We're closing in on Crane, but until we get him, you're not out of the woods." The warning followed them like a ghost. Brandon and Ethan moved into a new apartment, a small but cozy space they filled with Ethan's photographs and Brandon's books. They tried to build a normal life, but the fear was always there, a quiet hum beneath their laughter. One night, As they cooked dinner together, Ethan's phone pinged with an email from an anonymous sender. Attached was a single photo, Victor Crane, standing outside their old loft, his face half hidden but unmistakable. The message read, "You can't hide." Brandon's hands shook as he stared at the screen. "We need to end this," he said, his voice low but fierce. "For good." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "Let's talk to Hayes. We'll finish what we started." They met Hayes the next morning, laying out their plan. The police had a lead on Crane's location, a safe house in the marshes outside Savannah. It was risky, but Brandon and Ethan insisted on being part of the operation. "We've come this far," Brandon said. "We're not stopping now." Hayes relented, equipping them with new wires and strict instructions to stay back. As they drove to the marshes, the air thick with salt and tension, Brandon reached for Ethan's hand. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'm glad it's with you." Ethan's smile was fierce. "Always." The safe house was a dilapidated shack, surrounded by reeds and fog. Hayes' team moved in silently, but Crane was ready. Gunfire erupted, and Brandon and Ethan ducked behind a tree, their hearts pounding. Through the chaos, they saw Crane slip out the back, disappearing into the marsh. "He's getting away," Brandon shouted. Without thinking, they ran after him, the mud sucking at their shoes. Crane was fast, but Ethan's athletic build gave him an edge. They caught up just as Crane reached a small boat, his face twisting in rage as he saw them. "You kids don't know when to quit," he snarled, pulling a knife. Ethan tackled him, the two tumbling into the shallow water. Brandon dove in, helping pin Crane down as Hayes' team caught up, cuffing him. It was over. As they stumbled back to shore, soaked and shaking, Ethan pulled Brandon close. "We did it," he said, his voice raw. "It's really over." Brandon nodded, tears mixing with the marsh water on his face. For the first time in months, he felt free. The sun rose over Savannah, painting the city gold. Brandon and Ethan stood on the balcony of their new apartment, coffee mugs in hand, watching the world wake up. Victor Crane was behind bars, his network crumbling under the weight of the evidence Brandon and Ethan had helped uncover. Claire's trial was set to begin, and though the road ahead would be long, the worst was over. Richard joined them for breakfast that morning, his smile tentative but genuine. "I'm thinking of taking a trip," he said, his voice lighter than it had been in weeks. "Maybe Europe. Start fresh." Brandon grinned, his heart full. "That sounds perfect, Dad." As Richard left, Ethan slipped his arm around Brandon's waist, pulling him close. "You did more than stop a wedding," he said. "You saved him. And us." Brandon leaned into him, the warmth of Ethan's embrace chasing away the last shadows of fear. "We saved each other," he said softly. The months that followed were slow healing. Brandon and Ethan built a life together, their love a quiet strength that carried them through the media frenzy and lingering threats. They volunteered with a local LGBTQ+ center, sharing their story to inspire others. Their bond, forged in danger and trust, became a beacon of hope for those around them. One evening, as they walked through Forsyth Park, the same fountain glowing under the stars, Brandon stopped and turned to Ethan. "I want this forever," he said, his voice steady. "You and me." Ethan's eyes sparkled, his smile radiant. "Forever's a good start." They kissed, the world fading away, leaving only the promise of a future they'd fought for. The scars of the past remained, but they were proof of their strength, their love, their courage. Brandon had stopped his father's wedding, exposed a criminal, and found the man he'd spend his life with. And in that moment, under the Savannah stars, he knew it was worth every risk. Their story wasn't just about uncovering secrets. It was about discovering truth, about fighting for those they loved, and about building a life where love, in all its forms, could thrive. For Brandon and Ethan, that was the real victory.